Imagine a single M1 Abrams tank materializes on the battlefield at Gaugamela in 331 BC, facing Alexander the Great and 47,000 of history's most elite soldiers. On paper, this shouldn't even be a fight. The tank can kill from 2.5 miles away, while ancient weapons can't even scratch its armor. But here's what makes this scenario absolutely fascinating. Alexander the Great never lost a single battle in his entire life, and his tactical genius was so profound that military academies still study his strategies today. So the real question isn't whether a tank can beat ancient soldiers, it's whether the greatest military mind in history could figure out how to defeat technology from 2,300 years in the future. Let's establish exactly what we're dealing with, because the technological gap is almost incomprehensible. The M1 Abrams weighs 68 metric tons, which means it's 850 times heavier than a fully equipped Macedonian soldier. Its Honeywell gas turbine engine produces 1,500 horsepower and pushes this metal beast to 45 miles per hour on roads, while Alexander's legendary companion cavalry could only manage 25 to 30 miles per hour in short bursts before exhausting their horses. But weight and speed are just the beginning. The armor comparison becomes genuinely absurd when you examine it closely. The frontal protection on an M1 Abrams uses Chabum composite armor, providing the equivalent of around 350 millimeters of rolled steel protection against kinetic penetrators. And against shaped charges, that number climbs to approximately 700 millimeters. Scientific testing shows that a Sarissa pike thrust, the primary weapon of Alexander's phalanx, generates about 110 joules of force. The Abrams armor is rated to stop projectiles delivering millions of joules of energy. The technological gap sits at roughly 23,000 to 1. Nothing in Alexander's arsenal, not his pikes, not his javelins, not his catapults, not even his war elephants can penetrate this armor. It's not even close. Now let's talk about the tank's killing power, because this is where the scenario gets truly nightmarish for ancient soldiers. The main gun fires 105 millimeter rounds at 1,569 meters per second, with confirmed kills demonstrated at 4,000 meters, and the tank carries 55 rounds total. But for fighting massed infantry, the M1028 canister round matters most. Each canister round transforms the main gun into a massive shotgun, spraying approximately 1,100 tungsten balls in a devastating pattern effective out to 700 meters against personnel. One shot can kill or wound 50 to 100 soldiers instantly. Secondary weapons include an M2 50 caliber machine gun with 900 to 1,000 rounds effective to 1,800 meters, plus two M240 7.62 millimeter machine guns holding 11,000 to 14,000 rounds combined. And perhaps most terrifyingly from Alexander's perspective, thermal imaging allows the tank to detect targets through smoke, dust, and complete darkness at ranges exceeding 3,000 meters. The Abrams can see in the dark, outrun cavalry, and kill from nearly 2.5 miles away, while ancient weapons bounce harmlessly off its hull. This looks like a massacre waiting to happen. But now we need to understand exactly who Alexander the Great is bringing to this fight, because his 47,000 men at Gaugamela weren't a disorganized mob holding sharpened sticks. This was the most sophisticated military machine the ancient world had ever produced. The corps consisted of 12,000 pesetiroi, forming the famous Macedonian phalanx, armed with Sarissa pikes measuring 4 to 5.5 meters long and fighting in formation 16 ranks deep, with the first 5 ranks extending their weapons beyond the front line. Philip II, Alexander's father, had revolutionized Greek warfare by introducing full-time professional soldiering requiring at least 1 year of constant drill. These weren't farmers who picked up spears when war came. They were professional soldiers who trained every single day. The companion cavalry totaled around 2,100 riders carrying the Ziston lance,
history's first true shock cavalry trained to fight in wedge formation, designed to punch through enemy lines. Supporting them were 3,000 elite hypaspists, serving as the Army's flexible rapid response force, 1,800 Thessalian heavy cavalry, 1,000 Agrienian javelin troops, known as some of the finest light infantry in the ancient world, and between 300 and 500 torsion catapults, capable of hurling stones weighing up to 100 pounds. This army had conquered the Persian Empire, the largest empire on Earth at that time. What made Alexander's army truly dangerous went far beyond their equipment. It was their ability to adapt to completely unexpected threats. At the Battle of Hydaspes, war elephants appeared for the first time in European military history, somewhere between 85 and 200 of them, massive animals that terrified horses and could trample infantry formations. Alexander's soldiers had never seen an elephant before, yet they developed countermeasures on the spot. Light infantry targeted mahouts, the riders controlling the elephants, while the phalanx learned to open ranks and let panicked elephants pass through their formation without breaking. Within a single campaign, they'd neutralized a weapon that had terrified armies for generations. This wasn't just discipline, this was tactical genius combined with professional execution. They'd never seen a tank before either, but they had proven they could adapt to anything. So let's play out the first contact scenario, because this is where the tank's advantages are absolutely overwhelming.
Dawn breaks over the battlefield, and thermal imaging acquires the Macedonian formation at maximum range, over 3,000 meters away. The tank crew can see the entire army in perfect detail, while Alexander's soldiers can barely see the tank in the distance. Canister rounds open the engagement, and each M1028 sprays 1,100 tungsten projectiles across the phalanx's front ranks. Men holding 5-meter pikes cannot dodge fragments, moving faster than anything their experience has prepared them for. Alexander's veterans had faced sling bullets, moving at 160 kilometers per hour, with maximum ranges of 350 to 400 meters. Nothing, absolutely nothing in their experience prepared them for explosions from an invisible source nearly 2.5 miles away. The front ranks of the phalanx simply disintegrate. Soldiers are killed by weapons they cannot see, cannot understand, cannot even comprehend. The psychological impact would be absolutely devastating. Alexander orders the companion cavalry to attempt their signature hammer blow charge, the tactic that had shattered the Persian center at Gaugamela. 2,000 of history's finest cavalrymen thunder across the battlefield in perfect wedge formation, but at 42 miles per hour, the tank simply outruns horses pushing their absolute limits at 30 miles per hour. The cavalry cannot catch what they're chasing, and as they close to 1,800 meters, the coaxial machine gun engages. Horses and riders fall in waves, cut down by weapons that fire faster than the human eye can track. The charge breaks apart before it even reaches effective javelin range. From the Macedonian perspective, they're fighting something that cannot exist, a metal beast moving without horses, killing without arrows, seeing without eyes, invulnerable to every weapon they possess. This is the stuff of nightmares made real. In a single open battle lasting perhaps 2 hours, the tank would inflict casualties that would break any normal army. Ancient weapons generating 40 to 110 joules cannot penetrate armor rated to stop millions. The 4,000-meter engagement range means soldiers die without seeing what killed them. Thermal sights mean darkness provides no cover. The tank wins this fight without question. But Alexander the Great was watching, and he wasn't a normal commander. Historical research reveals a consistent pattern in Alexander's tactical thinking that makes him arguably the greatest military strategist who ever lived. At Gaugamela, he deliberately drew the Persian line wider until a gap opened, then led the companion cavalry straight through, directly at King Darius himself. At Hydaspes, he refused frontal assault against the elephants, conducted a night river crossing 17 miles upstream,
with 11,000 men in the middle of a monsoon, and completely negated the elephant advantage through positioning before the main battle even began. At the siege of Tyre, faced with an island city that seemed impossible to assault, he built a kilometer-long causeway across open water under constant enemy fire, then constructed siege towers 50 meters tall, taller than a 15-story modern building, using only ancient construction techniques. Those same engineers could dig trenches 3 meters deep in strategic locations, build earthen obstacles to channel the tank toward terrain where speed and range count for less, and create killing zones where the tank must choose between bad options. Light forces, the Agranian javelin troops and skirmishers, could shadow the tank from beyond effective range, falling back when it advances, never offering mass targets for the cannons, forcing the tank to burn fuel chasing enemies it can never catch. Alexander could implement a siege in reverse, the tank besieging an army it cannot destroy, while the army besieges a machine that must eventually stop moving.
Imagine the scenario extending beyond a single afternoon into days or weeks. The tank cannot maintain continuous combat operations. Every shot depletes ammunition that cannot be replaced. Every mile driven burns fuel that doesn't exist in the ancient world. Every hour of operation pushes the crew closer to exhaustion. Alexander, meanwhile, can afford to be patient. He's commanded armies on campaigns lasting years, fought in climates from Mediterranean beaches to Indian monsoons, adapted to every enemy and every terrain he ever encountered. His soldiers are professionals who can march 30 miles in a day and still fight when they arrive. His engineers have built siege equipment that defined the limits of ancient technology. His tactical flexibility is unmatched in military history. As the tank's ammunition depletes and fuel burns, Alexander's options multiply. The machine that looked invincible at dawn might be running on fumes by sunset, its ammunition nearly exhausted, its crew making mistakes from fatigue. There's a deeper point here that makes this scenario genuinely profound. Modern military technology would be completely incomprehensible to Alexander. That's absolutely true. A sergeant from a modern military operations staff, equipped with contemporary tactical doctrine and combined arms warfare knowledge, could potentially exploit the tank's capabilities more effectively than history's great captains, simply because they understand the technology. But that's exactly the point. Alexander wouldn't try to fight the tank on its terms. He wouldn't line up his phalanx for a glorious head-on battle. He would observe, adapt, and find the constraints. Could the tank kill thousands of his soldiers before its advantages run out? Absolutely. Would that be enough to win the war? That's the real question. The tank excels at destroying armies in open battle, but Alexander the Great excels at turning battles into something else entirely. He'd turn the engagement into a siege, a pursuit, a war of attrition, anything except the direct confrontation where the tank holds every advantage. History shows us what happens when Alexander faces impossible odds and unfamiliar weapons. He wins, not through strength, but through adaptation, not through superior equipment, but through superior thinking. The M1 Abrams is a masterpiece of modern military engineering, arguably the finest main battle tank ever built. It would inflict casualties that would shatter any normal ancient army within hours. But Alexander the Great didn't command a normal army, and he wasn't a normal commander. The outcome of this scenario depends entirely on whether the tank can kill enough of them fast enough before its ammunition runs out, before its fuel runs dry, before its crew collapses from exhaustion, before Alexander figures out the pattern. And history suggests that Alexander would find a way. He always did. That's why we're still talking about him 2,300 years later.